Hey, everybody, welcome to Author Eke. And today I'm really happy because tomorrow's Veterans Day. And today I have a veteran that I'm going to be talking to, Jeff Clark. So, the veterans of the Air Force, I feel I'm a veteran of the Air Force, even though I was in the Army because I spent the first entire 17 years of my life in an Air Force environment with my father, who was always in SAC. So, he was always gone, and especially during Vietnam. So, thank you very much, Jeff, for taking the time, and thank you for your service.
Yeah, sure.
So tell people about yourself.
Yeah, man, as you said, Air Force veteran. I did 12 years in the Air Force. Worked in logistics, supply chain. Did a couple of joint tours with the Army and one with the Army and the Navy at the same time. So I medically retired in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Air Force broke my back and broke my shoulders, and they just had enough of me. I said, okay, well, at least they retired me, instead of just
Yeah.
kicking me out the door. So, um, I'm like any other retiree as far as benefits go. So, yeah, I did 12 years there, came back,
Mm-hmm.
roughly 8 months later and joined the civil service with the Air Force. And I've been with the civil service ever
Excellent. So I have to ask you a question. I already know the answer to this, by the way, but I'm going to ask you anyways.
since.
So when you went on a fort, how was the food different than the Air Force Base mess halls?
Um, so it looked very similar.
Yes.
A dining facility, a mess hall,
Yeah.
chow hall, whatever you want to call it. Very similar structures and layout.
Uh,
So that wasn't much different. The taste was different, but when I got to Fort Sam Houston, that's when President Obama and Michelle Obama, the First Lady, had just passed a bunch of like food laws, and the
okay.
First Lady was really into like healthy eating for kids
Mm-hmm.
and school programs and all that stuff. Well, I guess the Army had grabbed onto some of that. So like their whole menu changed and they went like salt free and all this stuff. So like
Oh, no.
it was super bland, but also they were building Fort Sam Houston became Joint Base San Antonio. So they built a big Air Force built dining facility for like the campus there for all
Mm-hmm.
the students that we could go use.
Mm-hmm.
But like once the soldiers found out about it and they got their first taste of it, they're like, our food doesn't just suck. It really sucks. Like to the point where the garrison commander was
Yeah.
like, if I catch soldiers in that dining
Yeah.
facility and you stop using the garrison dining facilities,
Yeah.
like you're gonna get paperwork. And I felt so bad for him because I ate at the dining
Yeah.
facility just before they changed the menu, and I was like, the army food's not bad.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm
Not
not,
bad.
not gonna complain.
Yeah.
Um, but but then they changed it, and I felt real bad because I was like, oh my god.
I tell you, I knew some cooks. My dad, when I went in the Army, he said, "Son," he says, "let me give you a little bit of advice. Uh, be nice to the supply sergeant.
Hmm.
Be nice to the medics, and be nice to the
Hmm.
cooks."
Yeah,
So I had a scout platoon, and we had Bradley fighting vehicles, and we always had, a medic attached to the platoon, or we'd be out and we're like, "Hey, you want to go out and fire the 25 millimeter?" You know,
yeah.
they loved it, and we took the cooks out with us. We'd take supply guys out because if I lost anything, I was good to go. If my guys were hung over, they got an
Hmm.
IV, right?
Yep.
Uh, so I do appreciate definitely what those guys do. But we love taking them out there and let them have a little bit of fun and shoot some
Hmm.
rounds down range and everything. So I do love that. So you got out of the Air Force, you went into civil service,
Yep.
and then you decided to write a book.
Yeah. So actually, I wanted to write back on like active duty and
Mm-hmm.
just finding the time. And then the last 2 years were pretty stressful as they were going through the medical board process. So it
Yep.
was just wasn't something that was on my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when I got out and doing civil service for almost 2 years before I was like, okay, I'm going to try to do this. Um, and I started putting together, kind of a nonfiction leadership book. That was kind of the first thing I wanted to do. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to get that one book kind of out of me that I felt was necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I had to hang my legacy, my entire author career on one book, I wanted it to be something that when my kids read it, my grandkids read it, like it was value added. It wasn't just entertainment. So I did
Right.
nonfiction first.
Oh, nice.
Um, so that was real important to me. And I had just won a big Air Force level award. It was leadership centric. So I felt like I had a lot that I wanted to kind of document and get out and
Mm-hmm.
also kind of thank people for it. Like a show of appreciation. Like I wrote this book based upon the things that I learned, the successes that I had with other
Mm-hmm.
teammates. And it wasn't just, you know, me polishing the chrome on my own award.
Yep.
It was kind of a thank you to everybody. And again, if
Mm-hmm.
if I only got a chance to write one book, I wanted it to be one that had maximum impact and could touch a lot of people. So I wrote that. I pitched it around. I got a publishing deal, and then COVID hit.
Ah.
So COVID kind of delayed things a little. Um, so it took like a year and a half by the time I turned it in and we did edits and got through that big squeaky wheel
Mm-hmm.
of publishing before it saw the light of day in 2022.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. So you bring up a good point. I think that's what the military does. Is one of the aspects of the people. Even no matter what you do, what really rank you are, you build leadership traits because
Yeah.
you're going to be put in a position where you're going to have to make a decision. And you're going to have to go through that chain of events in your mind to come up with that decision. And sometimes it better be quick, like spot
Yeah.
on. I mean, so I think I do like when ex-military do write leadership book because it comes from doing, seeing, and knowing, right? And
Mhm.
having been the other end of somebody else's leadership that you say that's a good trait. I'm going to take that on as myself, and I want to really capitalize on that. So,
Yeah, exactly.
kudos for writing that
Exactly.
book.
Well,
Kudos
thank
for
you.
writing that book. Yeah, excellent. Now what are you doing? You wrote.
So now I've been working on some fiction
Mm,
um, stuff for a while now.
right.
I had a fiction book back when I pitched around my leadership book,
Mm,
and I'm glad that the publisher wanted it, but they wanted to do the nonfiction first, and to get the contract, I agreed to that.
right.
I'm glad that happened like that because my fiction was not ready. It was not.
Hmm.
It would have been a bad move on my
Right.
part
Right.
um, to put it out and that be my first fiction
Hmm.
book because I knew very little, and I think it would not have been a good product.
Right.
Um, I'm sure the publisher would have shined it up, but not to the degree that I think it probably needed to be a real impact. And since then, I've learned a lot about writing. I've been to several conferences. I've met
Hmm.
a lot of other authors and other veterans that are in fiction.
Hmm.
And so what I'm doing now is really polishing that craft. I have the first book done. It's called Acts of Lies,
Hmm.
and it's finished, and I've got it out there on submission right now. So I'm trying to find an agent, trying to find a publisher for that,
Okay.
and then working on other fiction ideas, books in the series and stuff like that.
So let's so you're going from a leadership book, nonfiction, right, to fiction, which is that's a little. I mean, that's a lot of your progression because a lot of stuff in fiction is real. I mean, you come from that.
Yeah. It's not so fiction in terms
Right.
of, a lot of like guys like Mark Gray, Brad Thorne.
Mm,
Those guys do a lot of research and they take a lot of real things and
yeah.
put them into the books and build a fiction story around them. Tom
Hmm.
Clancy was maybe one of the best
Yep.
at it because, the Hunt for Red October was about a Russian submarine with breakthrough technology that nobody believed existed,
Right.
and it did.
Yeah.
Just how
They thought he
Indiana
had a
gets money.
spy. They thought he had a leak inside the
Yeah,
Department of the Navy because he was
yeah,
an insurance salesman. I mean, that's what he
yes,
did. So
yes.
I
It
love that
was
book.
legit.
Yeah, it was everything. I read that book and I was in the Army as an E6. And I called the Navy recruiter in Frankfurt, Germany, said, I want to join the Navy. He goes, well, you'll lose a rank or two. And I'm going, goodbye. All right. I don't want to join the Navy that
Yeah.
bad.
Well, hold on, I don't want to lose any money
Hold on.
here.
Hold on now. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
like you said, so much of fiction is based around fact.
Mm-hmm.
or like in Brad Thor's case, he seems to almost be able to predict the future, what's going to happen.
Yep.
And those kind of minds like that can see things coming and can use their research to strategize. Brad
Mm-hmm.
Thor's consulted with the Pentagon before
Mm-hmm.
on battle strategy and
Mm-hmm.
international conflict, and he's got no military experience at all, but he gets that deep into
Right.
his work that um, that he's got a big brain, and I think that's a sign of what fiction, and at least in military and
Mm-hmm.
espionage,
Mm-hmm.
tradecraft type of fiction, I think a lot of authors have really nailed that down to where they can build a story around facts, and then you don't really know what you're reading is true or false.
Yeah, I do that. I do a lot of research for my books because I want the
Mm-hmm.
technology to seem like it's real, or
Yeah.
I expand upon technology that's out there, from
Mm-hmm.
nanobots to uh, AI to satellite technology and imaging and capabilities of that. I was talking to somebody at a book signing, and we got talking about my books, and he goes, "Oh, so you're like an early Tom Clancy?" I was like, well, "You can't beat that."
I'll take it.
Yeah, I'll take that. So what's the name of your leadership book?
Hear these truths: the ultimate guide to building your leadership algorithm.
And so is it like things to do? Talk us through the process how you wrote that.
So, when I first wrote it, I didn't have a title. I really didn't know what it was. It was just like one of those truthful, honest leadership books where it was like my whole purpose of the book was like when leadership flipped for me and I really started to understand it was when I looked in the mirror and I admitted to myself where some of my faults were and some of my downfalls were
Mm-hmm.
and some of the things that I really needed to do better. And once I did that and I had a humble opinion about myself,
Yep.
and it flipped for me. So that was really what the book was all about. But it sounded too preachy. It sounded like I was saying all these awesome things that I did right.
Mm-hmm.
And it read more like an autobiography almost. And I didn't like that. I wanted it to be
Right.
a tool that people could pick up. And if they just flipped to chapter 16, there's kind of a topic that it was centered around. They could read it, take something away from it, and they could close it if they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
So while I was figuring out the subtitle, because in a lot of times in nonfiction, you'll have a subtitle. It just won't be a
Yeah.
regular title.
Right.
Um, I ran across the word algorithm when I was on LinkedIn one day. And I looked up what an algorithm was, and it's basically an input into a set of processes, and then you get an output. And I thought, well, that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of how leadership works, you know? And
Yeah.
then that's when I thought about it. I was like, that's how I write the book. I write it in like 3 or 4 chunks. Effort plus process equals progress. And that's when it just changed for me. And then I went and reorganized the book into effort, you know,
Mm-hmm.
processes and progress because I
Right.
wanted it to focus on the things you do, the ways you do them, and then the progress that you make. Because we
Mm-hmm.
all know that the progress that you make isn't necessarily what you wanted the output to be. And even if it is, there's still more work to be done. So I
Sure.
didn't want it to be an all encompassing, like, okay, this is it, then I start over. No, you don't.
Mm-hmm.
So that progress part of the book is maybe the most important because it's like, okay, I have a product that is a result. What
Mm-hmm.
do I do with it? I like it or I hate it. There's so much work to be done. So for me, that's when the book came full circle, and I really had the vision for it. And so when I turned it back into the publisher and I said, "This is it. This is the algorithm. This is how I'm going to market it," they were like, "This is brilliant. We love
Mm-hmm.
this." So and everybody I kicked it to um, really liked it. I even have it on the back of my coin that I made,
Oh,
the
awesome.
algorithm, and I just think it really connected with the tone of the book, the honesty of it, and what you needed to do next. So, um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, effort plus progress equals or process equals progress, and that's how it formed.
So when in the Air Force did you realize that I'm a leader? Right. I mean, is there
Mm.
like they put you in a position where you had responsibility? I know in the Army how that works, but in the Air Force, how's that work?
So when you become an E4 in the Air Force, you can
Mm-hmm.
technically start um, officially leading
Mm-hmm.
things. So you're senior airman, I believe it's a specialist in the
Mm-hmm.
Army.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you can go to what they call as Airman Leadership School. And that's your first professional development school where they say, okay, this is kind of Supervisor 101. This is leadership. This is Air Force doctrine. These are things you need to know before you become an NCO, but you can use them now as you start to supervise. So for me, that was kind of when I realized, like, oh, okay, I can actually be a decent individual and not boss people around, but I can kind of lead them to do cool things
Right.
and be successful themselves. So I volunteered for a special duty as an instructor teaching at my schoolhouse for my career field. And that's when it kind of clicked for me, because when you walk into a classroom full of students, they don't see your rank or anything like that. They just, you're the teacher, you're the
Yep.
instructor, they're the guy you're listening to. You're supposed to know everything. You can't say things wrong. And that's when for me, it clicked. And I was like, okay, these people actually, they're looking at me for guidance, for teaching, to lead them. And that's when it really kind of clicked for me. And I was probably in 5 years when that moment really happened.
Yeah, similar in the Army. An E4 could be a specialist or it could be a corporal. A corporal is more from a leadership perspective.
Right.
An NCO, sort of, really an NCO. And then you move up, through sergeant. They used to have Spec 5, Spec 6, Spec 7, I think. But they did away with that because it was more specialized. Now you go to, at the time I was PLDC or PNOC primary, which was what you went to. Then as you progress, you went to basic NCO Academy, and then you went to advanced NCO Academy. Then you become a senior NCO, where you're doing different traits. All the schools are different. More PLDC was more for a field or combat or training individuals from a small team, small unit, and then you build up to section, platoon, company, troop, whatever you want to do. And so that's very similar. So you figured, okay, hey, you know what? I could be an effective leader, right? And I can do that. And then you're in the Air Force. And so did you continue? I was an instructor in the Army too. I taught armor school for a while. So can you then did you maintain always be a trainer then, or did you decide because your career said, oh no, you need to do this from a progression perspective?
Yeah, so it was a 4-year controlled tour, so you could only do it for 4 years. But I was at Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas, and they were doing a branch thing where they were moving all the medical training down to San Antonio. So my schoolhouse was one of the last to move down to San Antonio. But when we got there at Fort Sam Houston, and they stood up the joint base, they stood up the campus, they really hit people up and said, "Do you want to do a new contract, basically, where you do another 4 years?" And I said no. I loved the job, but I said no because in my career field, like if you're gone you're out of the career field for like 7 years, they don't want you back necessarily.
Right.
So they might force you to cross train. Well, if I did that, I was going to be at like 6 and some change. And I thought, man, that's probably too long for me to be out of it. And I really wanted to go back in and be back in like a hospital. And I wanted to deploy. I wanted to go overseas. I wanted to do some other things. So I said no. I did 2.5 more years, finished off my tour. I agreed to stay just a little longer to help out. Because again, the schoolhouse was new.
That's leadership.
Yeah, exactly. I took kind of I don't want to say a demotion, but I took kind of like a position demotion in order to let like the next phase of instructors take my spot to where I could stand behind them and say, hey, do this, or hey, this is how I would recommend it. So I spent the last year and a half of that being a support instructor for the new wave of instructors that are going to be there for the next 4 years, Army and Air Force. So I did that, and then my career field said, hey, we'll help you on your next assignment. Well, then we got a new career field chief, an E9, and she was like, nope, I don't do favors for instructors. So sorry, you're stuck in San Antonio. And I was like, oh, okay, well, San Antonio is not the worst place. Like we didn't mind South Texas. And so I had two options, basically go over to the Air Force Hospital on the other side of town, or go to, Brooks Army Medical Center right there down the road. So I said, well, I like doing this joint thing. Let me go over to the hospital. So I went over to the hospital, and the Army stuck me upstairs on operating room floor as their supply sergeant, essentially.
Oh wow.
And I know nothing about the operating room. I
Mm,
know very little about it. I know a lot more
right.
now, but
As long as they didn't
I
give you
was
a
only there a
scalpel.
couple of months. Yeah, like, hey man, don't make me see any blood. Like we're good. Like I'll do whatever y'all need, whatever supplies you need.
I'll give it to you
I'll get you
through
to
the
me.
door. Through the door.
Yeah, just don't ask me to come in there and see that stuff.
Yeah.
But I only did that for a few months, and then they pulled me downstairs to the basement to like supply chain headquarters, and they had a vacancy in the warehouse. They said, we got this 13,000 square foot warehouse plus another warehouse and 30 people, and we need like an awesome supervisor. And I was like, hey, I don't know how to tell you this, but I don't have like a ton of supervisory experience. I just
Yeah.
came from the schoolhouse teaching. They're
Right.
like, you were marching 40 to 60 students around every 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, you've got plenty of experience. So they just gave me the keys to the warehouses that don't screw it up.
Oh
So
wow.
I had Air Force airmen, Army soldiers,
Yeah.
a few NCOs, contractors, civilians. I had like
Mm,
30 something people in there, and my job was just to not screw it up. And um, that was probably the highlight of my career because it was literally joint in all facets of the
mm,
word. Getting the mission done so that all these surgeries can be done. We took care of the Wounded Warrior Center that was across the street, the Center for the
okay.
Intrepid. Like
Yeah.
seeing a package like only like this big come in that had a artificial foot in it that was $50,000 custom made for a soldier that was over in Afghanistan
Mm,
who is just trying to get his life back together. He's trying to learn
mm.
to walk again. And knowing that impact was super humbling.
Oh yeah.
And it was probably the highlight of my career just because of what it served and the mission we had and the level of importance of it. Like if we misplaced that package, that guy down the street, that
Mm,
sergeant who's my peer,
right.
who is depending upon me to get that in
Mm,
so he can learn to walk again, so he can go back to work, so he can rejoin his family, et cetera, et
yep.
cetera. And that's a big responsibility. So that was pretty cool. That was probably the highlight of my career after I did the instructor duty. So then I was in San Antonio for another close to 2 years
Mm.
doing that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't realize that. When you see news and everything, it's always the infantryman or the armor or the helicopter or the pilots and everything. But there is not a way in the world any way that would be possible without logistics, right?
Yeah,
Moving that
support's a big
from the
deal.
manufacturer all the way up to where they're putting it in a magazine, the bullets, right?
Yeah.
Or it's like everybody's job is important in the military. Every aspect of it, no matter what you do, it is very symbiotic where everybody has to do their job or something's not going to be right. And then
Oh
you
yeah.
see a lot of those when people fail to do what they're supposed to do. That you see the repercussions, right?
Hmm.
It's very evident when you see those. So so how do you write? You write like you have to be in a sterile environment. You can be ambient noise. Like get away, kids. When do you find time?
Juggling juggling social media, doing
Mm-hmm,
podcast interviews like this, and then doing my own podcast, I
mm-hmm,
found that I got to have a schedule. So, um, like, I'm not really recording a lot of podcasts in November and December. I'm going to resume again
mm-hmm,
in January.
mm-hmm,
So, November and December are dedicated to outlining some more books and getting some
mm-hmm,
more ideas done and working on book number two. Um, and what I try to do is every day I try to write, like 1,000 words.
mm-hmm.
Um, if I
That
can
seems about the
get closer to,
normal thing, really. People I talk
yeah,
to, that's
if I
about
can get
right.
closer to 2,000 words, that's more ideal. But
Mm-hmm,
between 1,000 and 1,500 words is like one chapter for me, roughly.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So if I can do that, even if it's not a chapter, it's like I write 500 words in this chapter, and then I move down and I write like another 400 in this one, because I'm trying to build the story, that's more
yep.
important to me than trying to finish a chapter. Like I want to build the story, and then I can always come back later and say I'm building more
Mm-hmm,
dialogue, blah blah blah, whatever.
mm-hmm,
Um, so I just try to do that 4 to 5 days out of the week. That's 4 to 6,000 words, maybe
mm-hmm,
closer to 7 or 8,000. And if I do that every week, you could write 20,000 words a month if
mm-hmm,
you stick to that and you can
mm-hmm,
make that a goal. And out of 100,000 word book, you could easily get that done in a couple of months if you're dedicated to it. And then on the weekends, sometimes I'll make up more.
Right.
Um, I just try to be really disciplined about it. And I have a desk here at home that I sit at. My laptop is connected to a bigger computer and a bigger screen, but then I can take that laptop if I want to go smoke a cigar outside, hit there and
Yes.
hammer on the keys by the pool.
Yep.
I want to take it to the park, to the library. So I like the freedom of having a laptop, but I also like the kind of the academic of sitting behind the computer, looking at a big screen that I
hmm
have where I can research on one side and have
Yep.
the manuscript on the other. Um, it just depends, man. I'm a weird guy when it comes to concentration. Sometimes I need dead silence,
Yep.
and then other times I got the record player behind me
Yep.
blaring an old Metallica vinyl. So
I don't. I like to. I'm probably ADD or something. I don't know. But I like to have a little bit of sound, music. I like listening to
mhm,
music when I write. It kind of helps me inspirationally wise. Um, I usually listen to country western, but I mean, I'm a product of the '70s and '80s, and I like
mhm.
rock and definitely like rock and roll. So, but I
I
do,
can't
and
listen to anything that I have to pay attention to. So
yeah,
if
I
I
don't.
I
Yeah,
can't put on a podcast, I can't put on a
no,
show. Um, I sometimes can put on, football or baseball,
mm,
but I can't be that into it. So it can't be
right,
one of my teams. So
right,
um,
yep.
I got to be able to kind of disconnect from it a little bit because I can't be paying attention. Because even music, sometimes, like I'll be getting into it, banging around on my desk or something.
And you see
Um,
your manuscript, you go, "Oh my God, what am I writing?"
so yeah, I can't be, I can't pay attention to it. So I can't put on a podcast or anything like that necessarily.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of the same way, and I'll I like to go work out in the morning. Right, I'll do a walk, and so I come back, and I live in North Texas. I live in Dallas, so the weather's nice most of the time, or Allen, Texas, actually. And so I'll go out and I'll sit out by the pool. You know, put my Bose little speaker out there, and I'll put some music on, and I'll just hammer away until the sun just beats me to death. Right.
Yeah.
Um, and now in the
Yeah. I
wintertime,
like
I'll
sitting
do it.
by the
What
pool
I can do.
too.
Oh, I do. It's tranquil.
Yeah.
And I'll come back in my office here. I got a big screen, and I'll come in here and type. And again, I do a ton of research because I want. If I say there's a town or a road, there's a town or a road, and you can take a left or a right, and so you can almost
Yeah. Yeah. Me
do
too.
it.
I use Google Maps a lot because I
hmm
like to be um, authentic in the name of, like, if I mention a town and then I mention a street,
hmm
like I want people to go onto Google Maps and be like, oh, I know exactly where he's talking about, or oh, I've actually been there. So like that's
Right.
authentic in what he said. So it's hard to travel there, but you can use things like Google Maps to get that authenticity. It's not quite the same with being there, 2 feet on
Right.
the ground, but I think it helps the reader understand and connect to you a little.
Right. I do. I like that because my first book, Flames of Deception. I mean, if you wanted to, if you could get to Russia, if you want to go to Russia, you could do the whole route of the team, right from Moscow all the way through the oil fields of Western Siberia down to uh, the Black Sea and uh, all these places. If you wanted to do it, you know, but
Yeah, that's
I
cool.
don't know if
Do
I can.
not
But yeah,
recommend going to Russia right now
no,
as an
not right now,
American,
not right
but
now, not right now,
it would
not
be
right now.
cool to do that.
Yeah. So how do you market? I think that's the hardest thing for authors is if you don't have a name that at the tip of somebody's tongue, it's hard to get out there. So what do you do? What's effective?
I think really getting the book into, or getting a product into the hands of people who will mention it, will say
hmm
something, will be an
hmm
advocate for you. And the writing community tends to be pretty big advocates of each other, kind of
Yes.
unconditionally. Um,
Yes.
but I think you also have to toot your own horn, and that is maybe the most difficult thing for a lot of authors to do because they don't want to do that. They want
hmm
to be more introverted behind the keyboard and they want to tell a story or they want to put their words down and then they want people to just enjoy it, and that's just not how it works. You have to
Right.
be out there screaming to the top of the mountains, I wrote a book and you need to read it,
hmm
and that's difficult. So you have to use a combination of the different tools on social media, podcasts and other media,
hmm
blogs, volunteer to write articles for other websites
Mm-hmm.
and magazines if you can even get in there. And there's a bunch of different writing magazines out there that people got to get on. And then you got to go to conferences, volunteer to be on panels and
Mm-hmm.
to speak because your publisher will do things to place you. And sometimes they'll have a publicist that will help get you onto certain things, but you have to carry a big part of that
Mm-hmm.
load. I found a new conference that I'm going to go to this year. I think it's called the Texas AuthorCon.
What is that?
It's I think they're on like their third or fourth year.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fiction thing. It looks like it's a little more geared towards horror and mystery and suspense.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping a lot of guys in the military and thriller, espionage genre kind of start going. I'm going to
When
try to
is it?
go this year.
You know when
Oh
it is?
man, I don't remember. I want to say it's in the spring
Because
sometime.
I'll go. I'll be there. If you're gonna go, I'll be there.
Yeah. I'll write it down. And they have a Facebook page,
I can
and
find that
I'll see if I can't find it and send
because
it
that's
to you. But
important. That's important of conferences.
yeah,
I'm
it's
gonna
really important to
BroCon.
go
I
there
think
and
I'm going this year.
yeah, and to
So
talk to people. And I'm going to BoucherCon. I went to BoucherCon
that's it.
before. It's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
really good one to go to. But I think you got to get out there and do that too. And it's an expense, but
Mm-hmm.
um, look at it like you have to network. That's probably
Mm-hmm.
your biggest thing. And if you can network before you publish, even though you kind of feel out of place,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm not an author in this genre, I want to be. Well, that's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what you need to be doing because the authors that are in that genre show up there. I met Connor Sullivan and Simon Gervais and Don Bentley at PoucherCon. I sat there
Mm-hmm.
and talked to Kyle Mills for hours, like we
Mm-hmm.
were best friends. We knew each other
Mm-hmm.
forever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they all said the same thing. If you ever need something, you pick my brain, call me. If I'm not busy, I'll help you out where I can. I have a busy
Right.
schedule, but they don't shy from their time. And I think you really have to do those things and try to market yourself because that's the only way you're going to do it.
Yeah. I think I didn't realize that. I've been writing for about a year and a half now. Maybe year and a half, a little over a year and a half. And I didn't realize that probably till 6 months ago. Because you always try to keep stuff tight to the vest, right? Tight to the person. Um, but I mean, I've interviewed a lot of folks, Kyle Mills, and just a ton of folks, and they'll all say the same thing. And it is, you're not taking my readers from me, right? There's enough readers for everybody. Enough people want
Yeah,
to read books, so
yeah.
they're
It's
very
not a
helpful.
competition.
And I'll do the same for anybody, right? I'll help you out whatever I can do. I love getting people on podcasts because that's the way that I learn. It's the way that somebody may, in my predicament, a year and a half, right now that I was a year and a half ago, maybe some a little nugget will come out and say, oh, now I need to do that. And so I
Hmm.
use that. I use TikTok. I call myself the walking author because I film myself walking, and I'll just come up with like 30 seconds of something stupid. But may not be stupid to somebody else. Oh yeah, that's kind of cool. This guy's kind of crazy. Let's just check him out or walk, on the
Yeah,
podcast and
that's what
Facebook and all
that's what
that.
matters, man, is getting a following and getting people to support you. I don't have all the time in the world to read. I try to read 20 plus books a
Yeah.
year, but it's hard.
Yep.
And I probably buy more than that because I buy books from other authors or they send
Mm,
them to me and I try to
yep.
show my support of that.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I have to donate books, but I donate
Mm-hmm.
books to people who can't have them or to other veterans at
Yep.
the local veterans center here.
Yep.
Um, so I make sure that, I saw it, I used it for what I could, or I read it, and then I go give it to someone else, and then I help another individual
Mm-hmm.
broaden their network.
I've given tons of book away to the library. Yeah. Matter of fact, my wife and I were walking down one morning, and this lady walks by me. And she turns around and she goes, "Are you that author?" And I go, "Yes." She goes, "Oh, I saw you on Facebook or whatever." My wife goes, "Oh no." She goes,
Here it
"Your
goes.
feet are not even touching the ground right now." I go, "What feet?" I go,
Yeah, yeah. That's
I
awesome
don't
though.
ever live that down either. I say, "Hey, I'm
I
the
wouldn't
author.
either.
I'm the author from Allen." Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big
So,
deal.
yeah. Well, Jeff, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And again, thank you for your
Yes,
service.
sir.
And what's the name of the book that people can buy right now?
You can hear these truths, the ultimate guide to building your leadership algorithm right now at all the major booksellers. So if you want an autographed copy, I still have some copies here. So you can hit me up on my website,
Okay.
jeffclarkofficial.com, and send me a message, and we can work that out for sure.
And where else can people contact you if they just want to start following you, especially writers helping writers, right? Authors helping authors.
So go to my website, jeffclarkofficial.com, and then I have the podcast and all my social media and my email contacts from there.
Excellent.
And you can start following me, sending me messages. You can check out the podcasts and other media things that I've done. And yeah, I'd be glad to link up with people. And going to do some awesome stuff in 2024. A couple conferences, Total Archery Challenge in South Oklahoma. So I'm hoping to link up with a lot of people next year and make some big moves.
Yeah, that's my goal next year. Is it's going to launch something. Something's going to launch.
Yeah,
we'll see what happens. I'll plan on getting my third book out in late fall next year. So,
cool. Yeah, and we're going to talk soon.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Jeff, it has been a pleasure, folks. If you didn't catch that, yes, I'm going to be on his podcast.
Sure are. Here in a couple weeks, right?
A couple weeks. I'm practicing.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff. Thanks a lot, man. Bye.
Yes, sir.